Before you give up, listen to these 7 promises God spoke. There are moments when quitting feels quieter than continuing. Not dramatic, not loud, just a slow surrender inside your chest. The kind that whispers, "This is too much." The kind that makes you stare at the ceiling at night, wondering how much longer you can carry what no one else sees. Faith can feel heavy when prayers seem unanswered. Hope can feel fragile when doors keep closing. You try to stay strong. You remind yourself of what you believe. But somewhere deep inside, exhaustion begins to speak louder than conviction. And right there, at the edge of giving up, is where God's promises matter most. Not when life is easy, not when everything makes sense, but when your strength feels thin and your courage feels small. The Bible is not a collection of empty encouragements. It is a record of God speaking into real human despair, into slavery, into exile, into sickness, into betrayal, into prisons, into broken dreams. The people God spoke to were not standing on mountaintops when they heard his promises. They were in valleys. They were uncertain. They were overwhelmed. And yet God did not withdraw his voice when they struggled. He leaned closer. Before you decide that nothing will change, before you conclude that your situation is permanent, before you let go of what God began in you, listen, because God has already spoken. His promises were not whispered casually. They were declared with authority. They were given to anchor you when the storm feels stronger than your faith. They were meant to steady you when doubt tries to take control. You may feel alone, but he said he would never leave you. You may feel weak, but he promised grace that carries you. You may feel tired, but he invited you to rest. You may feel lost in confusion, but he declared that he has plans for you. Don't make a permanent decision in a temporary storm. Tonight we are going to look at 7 of the most powerful promises God ever spoke, not as distant verses to memorize, but as living words meant for this exact moment in your life. If your heart is tired, if your faith feels stretched, if you are standing on the edge of surrender, pause. Before you give up, listen. Number 1, I will never leave you nor forsake you. There are pains that are easier to endure than abandonment. Loss hurts. Failure stings. Disappointment lingers. But feeling alone in the middle of it all, that can break something deep inside you. And that is exactly why this promise matters. I will never leave you nor forsake you. God did not whisper these words casually. He spoke them to people walking into uncertainty, to Joshua, stepping into leadership after Moses, to a nation standing at the edge of battles they could not win on their own. The future was intimidating. The responsibility was heavy. Fear was natural. And into that fear, God declared his presence. Not I might stay. Not I will visit occasionally. Not I will help if you perform well. Never leave. Never forsake. When you are on the verge of giving up, it is often because you feel isolated in your struggle. You may be surrounded by people, but still feel unseen. You may speak about your pain, but still feel misunderstood. And in that loneliness, quitting starts to look like relief. But this promise interrupts that narrative. God's presence is not dependent on your strength. It is not activated by your perfection. It does not withdraw when your faith wavers. Even when you feel distant, he remains near. Even when your prayers feel weak, he hears. Even when your emotions say you are alone, his word says, I am here. Some presence changes everything. When Moses faced the Red Sea, God's presence parted it. When Daniel sat in the lion's den, God's presence shut their mouths. When Paul sat in prison, God's presence filled the cell with worship. The situation did not always disappear instantly, but God never withdrew himself. If you are standing at the edge of surrender tonight, hear this clearly. You are not fighting alone. You are not carrying this by yourself. You are not forgotten in the silence. He is closer than your fear, closer than your doubt, closer than the storm. And sometimes the only reason you haven't collapsed completely is because his unseen presence has been holding you steady. Before you give up, remember who is standing with you. Number 2, my grace is sufficient for you. There is a different kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from feeling inadequate, You tried. You prayed. You pushed yourself. And still, you feel like you are not enough. Not strong enough. Not wise enough. Not resilient enough. And that quiet thought begins to grow. Maybe I just don't have what it takes. The Apostle Paul understood that feeling. He carried what he called a thorn in the flesh. We do not know exactly what it was, but we know it was persistent. He prayed for it to be removed, more than once, and instead of removing it, God gave him a promise. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That response feels surprising. We expect removal. God offered sufficiency. Grace is not just forgiveness. It is divine empowerment. It is strength that does not originate from you. It is capacity supplied by heaven when yours runs out. When you are about to give up, it is often because you believe your strength is the determining factor. You measure the mountain against your ability and conclude it is impossible. But God never asked you to rely on your own power. Grace meets you at the point of weakness, not after you fix it, not after you prove yourself, but in the middle of it. Paul eventually said something radical. He would boast in his weaknesses, not because he enjoyed them, but because they became places where God's power was visible. Weakness is not disqualification. It is invitation. When you feel like you cannot continue, that may be the exact place where grace begins to carry you. You may not feel stronger. You may not suddenly feel confident, but you will find that you are still standing, still breathing, still moving forward, not because of your strength, but because of His. Grace does not always remove the burden. Sometimes it strengthens your shoulders. If you are tired of trying to be enough, hear this promise. You were never meant to be enough on your own. Before you give up because you feel inadequate, remember this: His grace has not run out, and it is more than sufficient for this moment. Number 3, come to me, and I will give you rest. There is a kind of tired that sleep cannot fix. You can lie down for 8 hours and still wake up heavy. Your body may recover, but your soul still feels worn. Responsibilities pile up. Expectations press in. You carry conversations in your head long after they end. You replay mistakes. You brace yourself for tomorrow before today is even finished. And somewhere in that exhaustion, quitting begins to look like relief. That is why these words from Jesus are not gentle suggestions. They are lifelines. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Notice what He does not say. He does not say, fix yourself first. He does not say, become stronger, then come. He does not say, prove that you deserve help. He simply says, come. Rest in Scripture is not laziness. It is trust. It is laying down the weight you were never meant to carry alone. It is releasing the illusion that everything depends on you. Most people don't give up because they lack faith. They give up because they are exhausted from trying to control everything. Jesus invites you to exchange burdens. You bring Him your anxiety. He gives you peace. You bring Him your fear. He gives you assurance. You bring Him your striving. He gives you rest. This promise does not always mean circumstances disappear. It means your soul no longer collapses under them. It means your heart finds steady ground even when life feels unstable. When Elijah wanted to give up under a broom tree, God did not shame him. He gave him rest, food, silence, gentle presence. Before correction, there was care. If you are standing at the edge of surrender because you are tired beyond words, listen carefully. Jesus is not demanding more from you right now. He is inviting you closer. Rest is not retreat. It is renewal. Before you quit, because your strength feels gone, come, not to a solution, not to an explanation, but to Him. Number 4, all things work together for good. Some of the hardest moments in life are not exhausting. They are confusing. You pray for protection and face loss. You pray for open doors and experience rejection. You try to obey, and the path becomes harder instead of easier, and the question rises quietly. What is God doing? This promise speaks directly into that confusion. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. Notice what it says and what it doesn't. It does not say all things are good. Pain is not good. Betrayal is not good. Loss is not good. But God works through all things. He weaves what seems random. He redeems what seems wasted. He builds purpose where you only see fragments. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned. At every stage, quitting would have made sense. Nothing about his journey looked good. But years later, standing in a position of influence, he said something powerful. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. That is not denial. That is perspective shaped by time and trust. When you are about to give up, it is often because you believe the present chapter is the final one. You assume the setback is the end of the story. But God is not finished when you are frustrated. Working together means there are pieces you cannot yet see, threads that feel disconnected, delays that feel pointless. But in God's hands, nothing is wasted. Not the tears, not the waiting, not even the mistakes you regret. He does not promise immediate clarity. He promises eventual good. If you quit in the middle, you may never see how the pieces fit. Before you surrender to despair because this season feels unfair or meaningless, remember the author is still writing, and he is able to turn even this into something that shapes you for good. You may not understand it now, but you are not abandoned inside it. Number 5. I know the plans I have for you. Few things push a person toward giving up faster than believing there is no future worth waiting for. When doors close repeatedly, when opportunities fall apart, when your timeline collapses, it becomes easy to assume that maybe this is all there is. Maybe the dream was naive. Maybe the calling was imagined. Maybe the best days are already behind you. That is why this promise matters so deeply. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. God spoke those words to people in exile. They were not standing in blessing when they heard it. They were displaced, discouraged, far from home. Their circumstances did not reflect hope, but God's declaration did. Notice something powerful. He did not say, you know the plans. He said, I know. You may not understand the timeline. You may not see the pathway. You may not recognize how today connects to tomorrow. But the one who holds your future does. When you are on the verge of quitting, it is often because you have narrowed your vision to the present moment. Pain feels permanent. Delay feels final. Silence feels like rejection. But this promise pulls your eyes forward. God's plans are not fragile. They are not easily disrupted by setbacks. They are not canceled by one failure, or delayed by one detour. He works beyond your perspective. Joseph did not see the palace while sitting in prison. David did not see the throne while hiding in caves. Esther did not see deliverance when she was placed in uncertainty. But God knew. Hope is not optimism. It is confidence rooted in God's character. It is trusting that He is not improvising your life. If you feel like your story is stalled, hear this clearly. Delay is not denial. Waiting is not abandonment. The absence of visible progress does not mean the absence of purpose. Before you give up, because you cannot see where this is leading, remember, you are not the author, and the author knows exactly what he is writing. Number 6, ask, and it will be given to you. Sometimes giving up does not come from exhaustion or confusion. Sometimes it comes from silence. You prayed, you asked, you hoped, and nothing seemed to change. So slowly your prayers became shorter, less bold, less frequent, and eventually you stopped asking at all. That is why this promise feels almost defiant. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. Jesus did not speak these words casually. He was inviting persistence. Not once, not twice, but continuously. Ask. Keep asking. Seek. Keep seeking. Knock. Keep knocking. The promise is not about treating God like a vending machine. It is about relationship. A child does not hesitate to ask a loving father. A trusting heart does not assume the door is locked forever. When you are ready to give up, you are often tempted to stop praying. You conclude that silence equals refusal, But Scripture reminds us that timing is not rejection. Sometimes God answers immediately. Sometimes He answers differently. Sometimes He answers later. But He always hears. Prayer keeps your heart connected to hope. It keeps you aligned with heaven's perspective. It keeps your spirit from collapsing into despair. The early church prayed in prison. Hannah prayed in bitterness. The blind man cried out even when others told him to be quiet. And Jesus honored persistence. If you are tired of asking, remember this: the invitation still stands. Heaven has not closed its doors. Your voice has not lost its value. Your request has not been ignored. Before you quit because you feel unheard, ask again, seek again, knock again. Sometimes breakthrough is closer than you think. Number 7, behold, I am making all things new. There is a kind of giving up that doesn't come from exhaustion or confusion. It comes from regret, from looking at your past and thinking, I've ruined too much. From staring at broken relationships, lost opportunities, wrong decisions, and believing there is no way back. Sometimes the weight is not what happened to you, it's what you did. And into that shame, God speaks one of the most powerful promises in all of Scripture. Behold, I am making all things new, not repairing slightly, not patching temporarily, making new. This promise was spoken in Revelation in the context of restoration, after suffering, after persecution, after tears. God did not deny the pain of history. He declared redemption beyond it. Making all things new means that your story is not frozen in its worst chapter. It means failure does not have the final word. It means loss is not the ultimate conclusion. Peter denied Jesus publicly. Thomas doubted openly. Paul persecuted believers, and yet none of their failures disqualified them from renewal. God is not intimidated by your past. When you are about to give up because you believe you've gone too far or lost too much, this promise interrupts that lie. Newness is not something you manufacture. It is something God creates. He makes new hearts. He makes new beginnings. He makes new identities. He makes new paths where you thought the road ended. Sometimes newness does not look like erasing the past. Sometimes it looks like redeeming it. Joseph's suffering positioned him for influence. Ruth's loss led her to restoration. The cross itself looked like defeat before it revealed resurrection. New does not mean easy. It means transformed. If you feel defined by your mistakes, hear this. God specializes in rebuilding what feels beyond repair. He does not waste broken pieces. He reshapes them. Before you give up because you believe your story cannot recover, remember the one who created the world from nothing can certainly create something new from what feels shattered. And He is not finished yet. Conclusion. Don't quit before the promise speaks. When you stand on the edge of surrender, everything feels louder than hope. Fear feels convincing. Fatigue feels final. Doubt feels logical. But God has already spoken. I will never leave you. My grace is sufficient. Come to me and rest. All things work together for good. I know the plans I have for you. Ask, and it will be given. I am making all things new. These are not motivational quotes. They are declarations from the God who does not lie. If you are thinking about giving up, pause. Not because everything suddenly makes sense, but because quitting in the middle of a promise is not wisdom. It is interruption. You may not see the outcome yet. You may not feel strong today. But God's faithfulness is not determined by your emotion. His promises are not voided by your exhaustion. The storm may still be present. The waiting may continue. The answers may not arrive instantly. But His word remains. Before you walk away from faith, before you abandon hope, before you decide that nothing will change, listen again to what He has already said. Hold on a little longer. Pray one more time. Trust one more day. And if this message reminded you of a promise you almost forgot, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Speak it. Anchor someone else who is struggling. Because sometimes the difference between quitting and continuing is simply remembering what God has promised. And He always keeps His word.